We sit in a comfortable meditation posture and close the eyes. Put your attention on the silence that is always there deep in the mind. You are that silence, that eternal silence, the silent witness. Become the silent witness. And listen to the Yoga Vashishta. Book 4, Chapter 39. Continuing with verse 25. The well-discerning sage should tell only those who are enlightened in their understanding, whose desire of sensual gratification has abated, and who are free from their worldly desires, who are cleansed of the dirt of their ignorance, and who are prepared to receive religious and spiritual instruction. The spiritual guide who instructs his students without weighing well his habits and conduct is a silly teacher and sinks into hell and has to dwell there until the last day of judgment. That's a very harsh statement. The reason it is harsh is because in dealing with those who are striving to achieve enlightenment, we are communicating with their ego. Their ego is a collection of individual karmic traces. The ego has one agenda: maintain its existence. So when someone comes to the teacher, says, I want to be enlightened, help me to become enlightened, the teacher has to be very careful. So that the ego is not given the wrong instruction. Giving the ego the wrong instruction will result in the ego morphing into what we call the spiritual ego. The spiritual ego is extremely difficult to work with. The ego likes to treat everything as a game. The ego is always trying to win a game. Everything the ego does is based on taking from others. It's based on profit motive. Even the spiritual seeker who comes asking for enlightenment, he is basing everything on this game to take something from the spiritual teacher that he can use to make himself better than others. This is, of course, the absolutely wrong motivation for spiritual development. But that's what the ego does. So the teacher must know that every student that comes has the agenda to game the system. Let me extract as much knowledge from this teacher as possible so that I will become better than others. That's the agenda of this spiritual seeker. The spiritual ego that the ego wants to form is so well schooled in gaming the spiritual path that it will delay the enlightenment of the student for a very long time. This is why Vasishtha says, spiritual guide who instructs his student without weighing well his habits and conduct sinks into hell and has to dwell there until the last day of judgment. So that puts a very strong responsibility on the spiritual guide, doesn't it? To avoid creating the spiritual ego in the student. This is one reason we have developed the levels of consciousness survey and the Jyotish calculations. With these two, we can ascertain to some degree of certainty how the ego has developed, if the ego has become a spiritual ego. If the ego is a well-developed spiritual ego, then when the person takes the level of consciousness survey, they will score very, very high. They will score 900 or 1,000. So as a teacher, when we see this, we know we are working with a very strong spiritual ego. The ego who has not developed into a spiritual ego will score at a level that is more modest and in keeping with how they are speaking and acting in the world. Obviously, no one at level of consciousness 900 is going to come to anyone and ask for spiritual instruction. In fact, when someone comes for spiritual instruction and they find themselves in the level of consciousness survey coming in at well over 600, it's a very suspicious situation. Continuing at verse 27. The Venerable Vashishta, who was the chief of sages, and like the bright sun on earth, having considered these things, spoke to Rama as follows. Vashishta said, I will tell you, Ram, at the conclusion of this lecture, whether the attribution of impurity of gross bodies is applicable to Brahman or not. For now, know that Brahma is almighty, all-pervading, omnipresent, and is all himself. Because of his omnipotence, he can do and become all and everything of itself. You see various practices of magicians and tricks of jugglers in producing, presenting, and hiding many things in the sight of men. These are all only unreal shows. In the same way, Brahman produces, presents, and removes all things from and into himself. The world is filled with gardens like those in fairyland, and the sky is full with the airy castles of Gandharvas and the abodes of gods. Men are seen to descend from the cloudless sky to the surface of the earth and rise upwards to heaven. Fairy cities like the palaces of the Gandharvas of the ethereal regions are shown on earth and filled with the fairies of fairyland. Whatever there is or has been or is to be in this world are all like reflections of the revolving sky and heavenly bodies, or a brass ball affixed to the top of a tower and darting its golden light below. All these are only exhibitions of the various forms of manifestations of the self-same God. Whatever takes place at any time, or in any place and in any form, is only a variety of the one self-existent reality. Therefore, why, O Ram, should you give vent to your sorrow or joy, or wonder at any change of time or place, or nature and form of thing? They are all full of the Spirit of God and exhibit the endless aspects of the infinite mood. Let the intelligent preserve the sameness of their minds and dispositions amidst all changes, knowing them to be the varying conditions of the same unvarying mind. He who sees his God in all and is filled with equanimity has no cause for surprise, grief, or delight, or any other fluctuations of the mind in response to any change in nature or the ups and downs of his fortune. In all the variations of time and place, and in all external circumstances, the unaltered mind continues to see the varieties of the power of his Maker. The Lord proposes these plans in the formation of his creation and exhibits as the sea does its waves in endless varieties and successions from the fullness of his mind. So this is the personification of the silent witness. It's a natural tendency to assign a personification to the silent witness, to give it a personality, a name, a status. Why is that? Why do we do that? The silent witness is pure consciousness. Consciousness without personality. Because if it had personality, it wouldn't be pure consciousness. But that is the ultimate level of the silent witness. The silent witness is in various levels. And at any level of the silent witness, below the ultimate level of the silent witness, there arises this desire to personify the silent witness. When we personify the silent witness as God, as a spiritual being, as the creator, as the dreamer of the dream, we are connecting with a lower level of the silent witness. And that's okay. We have to connect with the lower levels to reach the highest level. When we're writing, like Vashishta is, or discoursing as Vashishta is doing, it's important to connect with the student. So we speak in terms of a personality of God. We even talk about God as the supreme personality, Krishna. To give us this sense that there is only one more step. So we strive for the connection of the silent witness of Krishna. We want to connect with the silent witness of God. That is our ultimate objective. And even that has a name. By mistake, by attrition of the ego, we call that pure consciousness. But the silent witness of the Supreme Personality of God, Krishna, has no name. It has only one quality: purity. And the ultimate form of purity is a void, total emptiness. Something that is totally empty is, by definition, without any impurity because of its emptiness. The Sanskrit word for pure is Shiva. So the Lord manifests the power situated in himself as the sea does its waves in itself, as milk forms butter, as earth produces earthenware, or thread is woven into cloth. The fig tree brings forth its fruit, and all other varied forms are contained in their sources. But these change in form and phenomena are not real. They are mere appearances of the spectrum, like those of apparitions and phantoms. Continuing as the silent witness, established in the ultimate level of the silent witness, the level of the silent witness that has no level. Start the esoteric Maha Mantra and the Trimana Sanyama process to balance all karmic traces that have been enlivened by this reading. Jai Gurudev.